Hello, and welcome to another Loom Press podcast. It's been a while. As well to our listeners, the little jingle you heard at the start of this is actually an original piece written by one of our listeners from Cardiff, a man named Philip May. So he sent that to me there over the weekend. So great to have such engagement from our audience. But today, anyway, we have our first American poet, Tristan Buttigieg. I'm saying that right, Tristan? Yeah,
Yeah, close enough. You got it.
close enough. Sorry, yeah,
Yeah. No,
Tristan
no, no.
Buttigieg. I think I was at Buttigieg. Yeah.
Yes,
Welcome to the
yes.
podcast. Well, unfortunately, Tristan's camera seems to be down. It is on, but it's not. It's not picking him up. But look, we'll have this dialogue anyway, and well, for our listeners on Spotify, it shouldn't be an issue anyway. Because we mainly do audio on that. But anyway, Tristan, thank you for coming on to the podcast.
No, Lee, thank you so much for having me. It's a real honor to be on here.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, yeah. So, as I said, you're the first American poet we've had on. Can you tell us a bit about yourself and your poetic journey and what's where you began and where you're at now?
Well, it's quite a long adventure, but it's something that I can try and condense. So, my parents own a company, okay, and this is like in the rock and roll kind of clothing company, rock and roll gothic. So I was always immersed in that, you know, that rock and roll world. And you know, next they bought like a little, a few CDs for me, and then I was really hooked on these, people like AC/DC, Queen, the typical rock bands, right? So I was like, I really like this is really cool, like these guys are really cool. And then it changed into them seeing the need for me to get a guitar because they really thought that we need to get this kid a guitar. And that's where it all really started from. I feel like the music and the poetry really coincide with each other because I've been writing since I've been very young. And but why the music and the poetry coincide? Because like I said, I've been writing for many years, but I just wasn't happy with the way it looked or the way it sounded. But I kept at it. I just kept at it, persisted. And one day, just totally random, I was listening to Bob Dylan. Okay.
Okay.
I'm huge Dylan fan. I
Yeah.
am. So just listening to Bob Dylan, and all of a sudden, I don't want to say the word possessed, but for lack of a better term, I was possessed to pick up a pen and paper and start writing something down that was inspired by the song, the feel and the motion of the song. And that is the first book in my poem in my debut collection. So that's the first poem that's put on the book, which is the
Wow.
first thing that I felt like I'm very happy about this.
The poem "Line Up the Animals." Uh,
Yes.
yeah,
Hmm.
very good. It's interesting you said you mentioned Queen and Bob Dylan there. I think you mentioned before when we over email that you have a new album coming out soon that kind of blends jazz and rock and pop and all different genres. And I know Queen was famous, obviously known for that as well with Bohemian Rhapsody, the kind of blend of classical and rock. Is that definitely an influence for you?
Yeah, it's definitely an influence of a lot of different genres for sure. Queen is, we can agree, is, one of the highlights on Mount Olympus when it comes to rock music and all that. But what the part I did miss out was that there was a time where when I was learning to play guitar, I didn't go to school. I didn't go to a school for learning instruments or anything. So I self-taught myself. And I had the hardest time learning chords. Okay. Which for the guitar people who are probably listening is probably the easiest thing to learn, but it was very difficult for me. So I was about to drop the whole thing. I'm like, no more of this. And then one day I saw a show and there was a photograph of Jimi Hendrix. Okay. Now, I was still interested in music. I just didn't want to play it anymore. So I was like, oh, let's check this guy out, see what he's about. And I heard one of his songs, and then within the first note, I got everything from our local library and I took every CD out of his. And that also kind of spurred that poetical journey as well, because I saw somebody, you know, I know you can't see me on the camera, praise AC/DC, praise Queen, praise all these people, but Hendrix did something for me that was very different musically and poetically at the
Mm.
same time. And along with Dylan, of course, but he really skyrocketed that inspiration.
Mm. Have you seen the new Bob Dylan film?
I have, yes, I'm very impressed with it. Yeah.
Um, I was never too into Dylan until, but I've started listening to him more and more as I watched after watching the movie. And yeah, like it makes you wonder, like the whole what it like his whole thing was like, when the booing him on the stage as well when he was playing with the electric guitar, but he was saying, well, look, this is still folk, like, and I suppose he's like pushing the boundary of what is folk and stuff. But it's amazing he never went to the Nobel Prize ceremony, which I think is crazy. And like when you look at like there's a lot of controversy around his like I would class him as definitely as a poet, but a lot of people there was controversy around his lyrics and whether they were sort of good enough to be considered Nobel Prize worthy. Like there's a lot of people that said we like his music, but does he deserve? I know he's the first ever songwriter in history to get Nobel Prize. But yeah, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, when it comes to Dylan, he's not your conventional poet, he's very inspired, as I am myself too, from that. Very inspired by the beat poets. The beat poets like Jack Kerouac, Allen Ginsberg, William Burroughs, people like that uh, tend to have a little bit of um, something that people don't expect when they read poetry. It's a whole different class in its own. And I think the unfamiliar does scare people,
Hmm.
which is why, even though a lot of people know who those beat poets are, they have a hard time classifying them as taking them seriously or, taking their work to greater heights. And and that's kind of like with my book. It's very, very beat oriented, very beat inspired. My poetry is more about opening up the subconscious.
Hmm.
You read the poem and you tell me what it means because everybody has a different interpretation in their life. And if it comes out different or if it comes out the same, that's fine. But I feel like interpretation is definitely important when you're reading any type of poetry. It depends on poetry, but I find it very important for that.
Hmm. So you're not really, am I right in saying that as a poet, you're not really concerned with sending out a particular message or idea. You're more interested in what ideas someone can get from your poems. You're not trying to give them an idea. You're just trying if they get an idea, a particular idea, that's great. But I'm not trying to induce that. Or what do you think?
No, you're exactly right. And the poems are I could classify as almost like a magazine. You flip one page, something different. You flip another page or something different. And each line evokes a different feeling and emotion, yet it all works together. It
Mm.
all works together in the same field. So, yeah, that's the main goal. I just want whoever reads the poetry to find some meaning in it, and even if they don't find meaning in it, to just find the beauty in the fact that they mesh together and that they can work together. Different sentences, different words.
Mm.
Um, but that's my take on it.
It's an interesting idea. Well, we might just maybe hear one of the poems. Maybe you could read the first poem in the collection if you have it there handy. Line up the animals might be a
Yep.
nice one to start off with.
Sure. Okay. So a little background on this. So I'm living in Philadelphia, but I was originally from New York City. And I was born in New York City. I moved here when I was about 6 or 7. And you're going to hear each stage is going to be a certain city or state that means a lot to me. Okay. So yeah, we'll start off with this. So line up the animals. Some things never change. A dusty throat, the theater stage. Sits numb in New York City, looking glum. Sitting on the stoop, you silly. Billy, open jackets are chilly in New York City. Sit and stay, man, a new command. The heads come in threes. Chewing gum in New York City, what a pity. A helicopter light shines on the straw where a rolling castle falls, washed away, turning gray in New York City. You've been here once before, the pastry shop, the bloody floor, sits cocky in New Jersey, looking tasty. Aren't you a little young? It's a sad, silly Billy similar in New Jersey, blue in the face, red hands every chance occurring before noon, feeling lazy in New Jersey, feeling worthy. I can die, I can die, I can die, but I'll never say I do in New Jersey. Somehow this feels right. The open arms, the studded sides, sits famous in Las Vegas, feeling aimless. Aren't you all washed up, even though it's dry in Las Vegas? A black blotch, you got caught. You know very little of my life. Stories painted in certain hues. It amuses you. You got the shock value. Feeling nameless in Las Vegas, a working waitress. When lights in total, manic depression hits the hair, it isn't fair when it doesn't shine on yours in Las Vegas.
It reminds me of T.S. Eliot with Proof Rock. Did you ever read Proof Rock?
I have, yes, I have. Yeah, no, in a way it does. Yeah. Um, I don't know if you're familiar with this poet. He's very big in England. His name is John Cooper Clarke.
Oh yeah. I
Yeah.
wanna be yours, John Cooper Clarke.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. Oh yeah.
And
Oh yeah.
I discovered him just out of mere just a freak accident. I was just watching YouTube one day, again, just watching a show, and then I happened to click on his video, and I fell in love with how he presented his poetry and just the imagery that he uses is definitely a big influence on me for sure. And I have met him a couple of times. He's a very nice man.
Have you?
Yeah, he's very nice. He came to first time I saw him was in New York, and then he came over to the Philadelphia area. He's a very nice man. If you ever get a chance to meet him. Um, but yeah, he's definitely a big influence on my writing as well, for
No
sure.
way. Jeez.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've actually only got into him recently. It's I was listening to that song as well. I want to be your, I love the opening line when he's like, I want to be your vacuum cleaner, breathing
Yeah.
in your dust. Yeah, yeah, he's great.
Exactly.
Yeah, he does
Yeah.
have the yeah. He's a unique way about him. A punk poet. Yeah, punk poet. Would you class yourself as
Right.
a punk poet?
Do I classify myself as a poet?
Sorry,
I would.
a punk poet. Punk poet.
Oh, punk poet. No, I wouldn't really say that. Um, I mean, I'm very immersed with, different types of styles, and it's very hard for me to classify or pigeonhole myself into one um, genre of poetry. I mean, a lot of the poetry is definitely a lot of freestyle, a lot of free verse kind of stuff. But in terms of if it's punk, if it's this, you can't really classify it.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. No, but yeah, I found myself when I was reading through your collection, there was lots of sort of what's the word? Disconnected ideas or disconnected images and stuff. And I was trying to, I was like, at times I was like, there's one thing and then you're onto the next, and I was like, what is? But then I see as I was going on, as I was progressing through it, uh, it's like it's. I suppose it made me think of the way our minds work. Our minds aren't sort of linear. We don't just go from one thought to the next. We could see something, say, we could taste something and it might bring us back somewhere, or
Right.
like, and I think that's when you mentioned earlier the subconscious, and I think that I can understand a bit what you're trying to get out of, we're being sort of we have lots of different things happening, and yeah, I think that's the same thing in your poems. There's lots of little sort of disconnected images, but when you take a step back, it's sort of a bigger picture. I don't know if I'm making sense there with expressing that idea, but does that make any sense?
No, it does. It does. And I feel like, as humans, we either don't have the capacity or we don't have the time, what with everybody's busy lives, to really understand what's going on around us. And it's almost like a form of therapy or a form of meditation when I write, if you want to go that deep. It's just a way to kind of see what's going on around the world, kind of expressing how what is going on in the world. Um, and again, it's something that could be interpreted differently by everybody else, depending on their lifestyle, depending on what's going on in their life. But no, I definitely agree with that statement you made. It's different thoughts. And again, like I said earlier, people are very afraid a lot of times of the unfamiliar. The unfamiliar, if you're doing your daily duties throughout the day, wake up and then do this and then do that, but then there's a little break in the routine. People get scared by that. People might get a little um, shocked, for a better word, to like that their routine is broken. So that this sort of poetry is kind of like a break in routine from the classical poetry. Not that I'm opposed to it. I love Blake and all those people, but when it comes to the beat poets, they really did question society. They questioned the way we think, the way we see, the way we feel, and I find that to be very important.
Mm.
You know, and I hear a lot of poets around my area in the Philadelphia area that they'll they'll talk about the very surface level stuff, but they're not really addressing the bigger picture in a way. That's just my opinion. And not to say that there are wonderful poets in the Philadelphia area. I know quite a few who are wonderful poets. It's just that, I guess mine is very off the wall, if you want to say. So, again, people just aren't used to that kind of off the wall thing.
Yeah, I suppose there's kind of like maybe the term I was looking for a minute ago was stream of consciousness, kind of a stream of consciousness poetry, like, maybe it's kind of filtered into that idea, um, with some of your poems. But what was I going to say then? Oh yeah, so I think I was at the back of your collection. I was reading your little kind of piece about yourself, and you were saying
Mhm.
something to the effect of the objective of art should be equivocal and unrestrained. Um, but I know there's many people that sort of, when they're in class, say if they're in or high school, as you might say over there, if they're in like secondary school and they're learning different kind of looking at different poets, and it's almost like these old poets, or even some modern day poets as well. They're almost like priests, given these sort of standing at lecterns, and they're very kind of sort of highfalutin, high and mighty way of speaking, and maybe a bit sort of obscure. Do you think that there's a? I know a lot of people think that poetry should be very should be accessible, as a way of sort of reaching the most people as possible. But do you think that
Mhm.
there's should poetry or should art be obscure?
Um, I definitely think it does help. When you look at the traditional way of teaching in general in schools, and we're just going to talk about English for now because we are talking about poetry. Um, it's very, what's the one I'm trying to think about? It's like through a machine. It's just very the same ideas that have been shared down through generation, and there's almost not any leeway to share any new ideas about a poet in the term of traditional teaching. I definitely feel like again we need to have any kind of poetry needs to have, even if you're writing something specific, some form of poetry is going to mean something different to somebody. And that is very important because if we think the same thing about a certain poem, it's going to be like a Brave New World.
Mm.
You can't, it just doesn't make any sense to me to have a poem mean the same thing. It has, must mean different things, like I've been saying. So, um, yeah, that's really my answer on that. I mean, I think it's very important that we have differences in the poetry.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. I think so. Even I remember one of my lecturers talking about Finnegan's Wake. I don't know if you've ever read Finnegan's Wake. I'm still halfway through it. I've been reading it for like 4 years,
Hmm.
but it's impenetrable, but it's one thing the lecturer said that really resonated with me is that he said, "No, it's a beautiful thing because it's like a painting, like an abstract painting, and you can stare at it. Like for example, if there's a painting that's very realistic and it's like a carbon copy of whatever it is that's capturing, and it's an amazing painting that like is very realistic. That's great, and but you can see it and you know what it is, But an
Right.
abstract painting, you could stare in front of it, stare at it for hours, and after a while, you might start making sense of whatever it is, and you might get something from it, and someone else might get something else from it. So I suppose he said that it was like that. The longer you stare at it, or the longer you spend time with it, you get different things from it, and there were these flashes of insight I was getting even throughout your own collection as well. There was one poem I really liked, "Tasteful Nudes." Maybe you'd like
Oh,
to "Tasteful Nudes." Uh,
yeah.
and
Let me search for that.
I don't have the physical book, but I did buy the ebook, so I can zoom to it.
No, I
I have to
appreciate
ask you as
it.
well. Sorry, there's on one of the introduction pages. I don't know if you guys can see. There's a symbol there. It's not very clear. Um, it's like it looks like an Illuminati eye or
Yeah.
Illuminati symbol. Was that just from the publisher, or was that intentional? Did you want that in, or what is it?
No, that's from the publisher. That's just a coincidence. So that's from the publisher.
Okay, okay,
That's their symbol.
that's their thing.
Um, okay, so you wanted me to read the poem?
Yeah, tasteful nudes. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. All right. Tasteful Nudes. And before I read it, once you something you notice about this book here, Have Nine Lives, my debut poetry collection, what you'll notice is that when we start from line up the animals, each page gradually starts to form a more concrete style to where each page I'm very happy about. So this type of style of writing, I find to be very engaging when I write like in this style. So okay, tasteful nudes, a flash interest, losing their innocence, socially amazing, a messy, muddy feeling of thanks, a lost care. Call, called the calculated cult. There's no one there but all the applause. White roses, red angels, the palpitating stars, breezy, taboo, beauties in the same clothes, veritable feasts, their gills growing bright. Say grace, overcasted, a bad photogenic, the sheep with no skin, silent surfs in the night, a bandit in the sun, chased like a wet rat.
Yeah. Listening to it again, like it's weird, like the images that strike you. And as you said, like going into the subconscious. Like one of the images there that as you were reading that struck me was you said the sheep with no skin. I thought, does that mean, because I mean, look, people people take nudes or send nudes nowadays and ask for nudes, and that happens.
Yeah.
they're all sheep, and then they've got no, it made me think of that. Yeah, so just all these ideas. But yeah, it's strange, strange imagery, but it does get the mind thinking. It makes you ask different questions arise in each of the poems. Yeah, very good. Who would you say your
Yeah.
biggest influence? You mentioned obviously the beat poets and Dylan and things like. But in terms of maybe like poets, who would be your biggest influence?
For poets, it's really, really hard to say. I mean, like I did mention earlier, John Cooper Clarke is definitely he's on my Mount Rushmore. You know, he's definitely top on that one. Um, and I did mention earlier Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah.
Even though we don't classify him as a poet,
Mm,
um, the way he approaches the guitar again is like a painting or a symphony.
yeah.
And that is how I wanted to make it come across as well,
Mm,
like a symphony or a painting, to where there really is no, there's just a continuous flow of things going on. So I would definitely say those two are big influences. Like I said earlier, I love people like William Blake, people like that. Um, but I really got to say the beat poets really made an impact on me for sure.
yeah.
That
Um,
American style way of life, like Jack Kerouac wrote On the Road. Like to me, I think that's magical. I just think that's magical. And it's a very simple basis of just going around the country and just going on different little adventures. But in the end, it's something that everybody can relate to in a way, but through different interpretations.
mm,
So, but I really think the beat poets for sure.
yeah. Um, One of the things I suppose, now unfortunately, I tried looking online, but I didn't find any. Or maybe I wasn't too accessible. I didn't find it. I didn't get a chance to listen to any of the music or musical thing collaborations you were involved with, unfortunately. But and one of the things I was going to say though, while I did enjoy a lot of the poems in the collection, they didn't strike. One thing I wouldn't describe them as musical. They didn't strike me as musical. But maybe if they were, like, would you say that when you were writing them that you had a sort of a, was a musicality to them, or what do you think?
No, there was no intention behind any of the music, any connection with the music of the poetry. There was no connection at all. But again, it's the thing where two unlikely parts seem to meet in a world where it does work. And like I said, I've been working on a new debut album, and there's just certain poems that I feel like work very well with the music.
Hmm.
And sometimes you may read a poem and it may not seem very rhythmic, or you may hear a poem and it might not sound very rhythmic, but um, there's no, like, when I'm writing a poem, I'm not writing this like, oh, I'm gonna write this for a song. I'm gonna write this for this. It's again the pairing of two unknown things that could sound good together. And it's just by chance that it does sound good together. But yeah, there's no real correlation with that. But I do like to connect them both.
Yeah. Um, John Cooper Clarke. I wonder, do you know, fella? He actually he supports him a lot. He goes on like on tours with him with John Cooper Clarke. Mike Gary. Have you heard of Mike Gary?
I met him too. Yeah, he's a very nice guy. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I met him myself. He came to there's a town near where I'm based called Kilcock. And there's a poetry sort of a open mic session that goes on there once every 2 months or so, and he was a
Mhm.
featured act. I'd never heard of him before that, but he blew me away. Like
Yeah.
it was this real intimate setting, like a small library, and he was there, and he just the way he kind of like he literally he made eye contact with me for like 10 seconds.
Yeah.
Like, there was a crowd of like 30 of us, and he just stared at me as he was talking, and I was just like, "What?" But he
Yeah.
was amazing, and yeah. But there's a he. I watched it the other day. The name escapes me. Of it's like a song, but it was by, I think it may have been a collaboration with a group called Orbital, but they've got like kind of real upbeat, funky music, and he's dressed as like an astronaut, and he's just talking, but it's like, and there's no sort of rhythm to what he's saying, but it goes so well with the music. Is that the kind of sort of vibe that you're going for? That written spoken word, or yeah, spoken word pieces that can sort of be adapted to different kind of maybe musical backgrounds or tracks or.
It's definitely a combination. I like to try and make the music or the singing part more melodic, but there will be times where I would, like to um, do the spoken word behind a backing track of music. But a lot of the time I'll like to sing the poetry along with the music. And it's interesting, excuse me, it's interesting you say that because Mike Gary and John Cooper Clarke, um, the thing, I mean, I don't get me wrong, I love Mike Gary, but the thing about John Cooper Clarke is that he is very influenced by the New York punk movement. Okay, and I don't know if you're familiar, but we're talking about like the Ramones.
Mm,
I can't think of any other right now, but people like that.
mm,
And originally coming from New York, it was almost like a familiar voice. Like this guy gets it. This guy gets where I'm coming from. He gets my surroundings. He knows what things I like, and he knows how to write it down. So that's part of the reason why I do appreciate him. And he also made some great musical collaborations with his poetry too.
mm.
Um, but I try to do it in more of a melodic way, sort of how Dylan would in a sense, but just a combination of those three, and then you have like some of the rock acts, like I'll try and make like a little riff here that would pair up with a line or two. So I definitely try to make it different styles.
Very good. Yeah. I'm just conscious of time. We have 5 minutes left. I want to talk about your. Has it? It hasn't been released yet. Has Burlesque? Is it? Has it? Is it? It's coming. It's due to come out.
It's due to come out very soon. It's due to come out in April, or early April. So it's gonna come out soon. Yeah.
Okay. No, because I saw a post on your page. I think it mentioned it was going to be released January, but obviously it's been postponed, has it?
Yeah, it's been a little postponed. We've, had a little personal stuff. But yeah, it has been postponed, but it's definitely going to be in April for sure.
Very good. Um. Maybe I don't. Well, I don't know, but maybe you can tell us a bit about how will Burlesque. Is it going to be a sort of a different vibe, a different? Is it the same sort of energy as how to have 9 lives, or are you sort of maybe trying to evolve or going down a explore certain ideas more or tap into
Well,
different.
this book Burlesque actually has artwork in it. So some of the artwork you do see on my Instagram page, which is at official Tristan Buttigieg, um, some of that artwork is in the book, whereas to have 9 lives doesn't have them. So I want to definitely kind of connect two unlikely things. You're going to have a poem, you're going to have a painting in the book, and the two may not jive together, but it's a different form of beauty in itself.
Mm,
And there's definitely paintings in that for sure, or Photoshop art and paintings. It is similar to the style of Have 9 Lives for sure, but it shows that evolvement of, like, I find Line Up the Animals to be a cornerstone. Line Up the Animals is the cornerstone, and whatever you read after that is onward and moving, progressing in the writing. So it is a similar style, but in a way, um, with the help of the artwork, I hope that it does make a different interpretation
yeah.
for others.
Maybe I don't know if you have it handy there, but maybe is it possible maybe you could read a poem from the new collection? Uh,
You know what? I unfortunately I don't have it right in front of me right now, but
no worries. No
you'll have to
worries.
buy the book.
Have to buy the book. Well, absolutely.
Yeah.
No worries at all. Yeah, well, I suppose maybe we can hear one more from uh, from Have Nine Lives. Maybe there's a is there a particular have you a particular a favorite poem that you'd like to read from it, or
Sure. So I have a excuse me, I have a poem here. It's titled "Stick with Me, Lazaro."
yeah,
Now,
I meant to ask about that because I know the book
yeah,
is dedicated to Jack Lazaro.
yes,
Yeah,
Jack Lazaro is my great grandfather on my mother's side, and we were looking through different family photos one day, and I don't know, something just struck a chord with me with this guy to the point where I even had to write a poem about him, which means a lot, if you if you strike a chord with me. So this is more of a description of his life in a way. It's not really so much like the subconscious thoughts and stuff like that, but it's a little bit more about his life. But I could definitely read that one. Okay, so yeah, so this the title "Stick with Me, Lazaro." You're a man with a dream in your childhood years, scissored out, throwing pennies. All that glitters isn't gold. Blasting badges on familiar walls, with no part in the plot. The start of this dance creates a river of tears. Expired like a flower, failed health takes the maker, and we weep, taking the shine off yourself. A monster of the night, with shards in your dreams. Must the child be arrested, praying to the azure chrome skies of the one true Savior, throwing newspaper prints at the graveyard bones, scrambled, en route, separate piles of ashes, shining light through the sky, through the popcorn raindrops, keeps the kids, borrow them only for the night. Move to the East Coast to marry my true bride, a haunting ghost to their plastic displays. Spinning wheels, missing pages, walking through each other's eyes, paint brushed lust between the lines. Little did we know that we were blood on the run. Heaves a loss, a dedicated depression, shows death doesn't wait, wearing thorns, steals the form of a three-dimensional scheme. The ravine breaks for parents of two. The injections of nighttime slashings, struggled, bludgeoned, looking ancient as usual, comforting an old-fashioned flame. Time chips at the saw, and the sand timer sand starts to drain. Daughter's husband dies, and Gracie's gone insane. Whatever happens to me, kid, I'll always be with you.
sorry guys, we had some technical difficulties there. Well, we ran out of time in the meeting, but we restarted, and now Tristan's camera's working. So if you've lasted this long, if you've listened to the entire podcast, you've made it to the end, you can see Tristan there now in all his glory. Um, so we were just wrapping up the reading of the poem about Lazaro. Stick with me, Lazaro. Yeah. So you would be going giving a bit of context about that. So maybe you can just we can do that before we wrap up today's podcast.
Yeah, sure. So, like I said before the break, that Jack Lazaro was my great grandfather on my mother's side, and he was somebody who went through a lot of trials and errors in his life. And at the time when I was writing that, I think I also was going, as many people do, I was also going through the same trials and errors that most people go through. And I found it very inspirational. And again, when I first heard about him, something clicked in my head that like I gotta write a poem about this guy. And it's gotta end with those two lines. Whatever happens to me, kid, I'll always be with you. Because that was the last words that he said to my grandmother and her sister. And I thought that is such a great line to just end it that way, to end and so abruptly to where it makes you think. And no, the book is definitely dedicated to him for sure. And he just very left a very lasting impact on me for sure.
Yeah, I think many grandparents do definitely. Uh, did you say this is your great? You is your great grandfather, or this is your grandfather? Sorry.
No, great grandfather. Yeah.
And you knew him. That's amazing. That's your great grandfather. Well, yeah, geez. Yeah. But yeah, absolutely they can. And I know in my own life as well. I've my own collection. I've a good few poems that were dedicated to my grandparents as well. So definitely, and yeah, I that even that line, I remember that line resonating with me as well. And while many of the poems are kind of in the collection are abstract, those real emotional lines, like such as that, they sort of they're universal. They transcend all that. So that's very good.
Right.
Uh, Tristan, thank you for coming on the podcast. Been great having you.
Lee, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast. It's a
Yeah,
pleasure.
to Pearlescent, and we look forward to your album as well. Have you got a name for the album?
Not yet, but still brewing on that.
Okay,
Definitely still working on the book, and then the album is going to come shortly after. Yeah.
very good, very good. Well, look, it's been a pleasure, and yeah, yeah. So thank you for watching, guys, as well, our listeners, and be sure to give Tristan a follow on his Instagram page, and yeah, definitely if you haven't, check out his book, Have Nine Lives, as well. By what's the name of the book? I couldn't pronounce the publisher's name. Six books.
Yeah, 6 books. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So check out 6 books and have 9 lives and keep an eye out for Pearlescent as well. Right, Tristan, mind yourself and enjoy your day.
All right. Peace. Thank you, Lee. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.